You are listening to The Power of Connections with connections expert Linda Elliot. From founders to pioneers, Linda will interview influencers who are shaping and changing the world through meaningful connections.
This month, we are focused on the power of first impressions. There's just so much involved in making the right first impression. I could have taken this interview in multiple directions, but I've chosen to concentrate on the very core of our being. It starts with the sustenance that fuels our bodies. I'm visiting with Jan Tilley, president of JTA Wellness. Welcome, Jan.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for agreeing to be with us. I've known you for several years and have always looked up to you. A bit about Jan. She is a dietitian and a nutritionist who helps people change their lives. Jan and her team are skilled in dealing with chronic illness and unhealthy lifestyles. Let's face it, if you're not taking care of the basics in the right way, it is impossible to hide the fact. I haven't met anyone else who does quite what Jan does. She inspires people to love themselves and to believe anything is possible because they deserve all that life has to offer. Don't you know that is a huge part of how people impact others? As I mature, I have found that I must be more aware of what's going on in my body. Fortunately, I've been blessed with a good metabolism and have been able to eat pretty much anything. I hate to admit it, but there was a time when I ate several slices of bacon every single day. How disgusting is that? Thankfully, I got over that addiction. Who knows where I'd be today? My metabolism, however, is definitely slowing down, and I do have to be more conscious of what I eat. So now I need to heed your advice, Jan. You talk about how important it is to properly fuel our bodies. We want to learn what you mean by that. Since we're talking about first impressions, share with us how you can tell whether or not a person is taking care of themselves. Are there any outward signs?
There are so many outward signs, and one of the things that I usually notice when people come in is their lack of energy. They're flat, kind of a flat affect, and they just don't seem themselves. Their eyes aren't bright, their skin looks bad. They're just often almost a little bit depressed, because they're thinking, how did I let myself get to this place? And is there any hope for me? And so it's really kind of this lack of hope, fatigue, low energy that I see. And then the wonderful part is when they come back next and they're like, wow, I had no idea I could feel this good again.
That's great. And that leads me into asking the next question. When you get started with a new client, what is your process to help them get motivated to make changes in the way they live their lives?
When I start with a new client, often I try to let them talk for the first few minutes and find out what their compelling reason for making a change is. So why are they here? What changes are they looking for? And what's going to motivate them within their life, their world, to make those changes? So often people are thinking, they either have new grandchildren, or they have a wedding coming up, or they have a high school reunion, or they're going on a cruise. I mean, it can be 1,000 different reasons. Or often it's a poor health diagnosis that's gotten their attention. And so we allow that to motivate them. And normally what I tell people is the first week or so of this is going to be tedious because you're kind of learning a new lifestyle, a new way to eat. And so give it a week. And you can think it's uncomfortable. You don't have to love it. But after that, you're going to start seeing, wow, I've dropped a couple of pounds. I feel better than I felt in years. My energy level's up. And that's the motivator. That really helps people go ahead and make the change.
Nobody likes to diet or be forced to work hard to balance their meals. And in today's world, it seems all but impossible. Especially if you're working full-time, eating most of your meals out, like I do. What's the solution?
Well, first of all, we don't talk about diets. This is not a diet. This is really changing the way you approach food. And so you said in the very beginning, we talk about fueling your body. And I love the analogy, I always use it with people, of the fact that our bodies are machines. And machines take fuel to operate. And we get so caught up in thinking food is comfort, it's social, it's fun, it's delicious, it's all these things. But truly, if you break it all down, food is fuel to make us operate at our best. And so I really try to approach people on, let's get you to eat for energy. Weight loss is going to be this wonderful side benefit that happens, but how do we fuel you so that you are ready for peak performance all day, every day?
That's very interesting. I like that analogy. I have jokingly referred to you as a part-time therapist. I mean, I see boxes of Kleenexes around. Apparently, I'm not too far off based on that, right?
Right.
You said that in most cases, your clients have underlying issues that prevent them from taking care of themselves. Explain that to us.
You know, a lot of times when I see patients, I mean, they come in, and of course, our appearance, our weight is something that's very personal. And many times it's caused people so many hurts and wounds and things throughout their life. And it's, you know, we all kind of have that one cross to bear in our life. And for many people, that happens to be their weight or the way that they have approached food in the past. And so it is a very personal thing, and people get very emotional about the way they look. And so what we try to do is help them identify what that is that's going on. So yes, there are a lot of tears and a lot of Kleenexes, and people are always very apologetic. And I'm like, hey, why do you think I have the Kleenexes? Everybody cries in here. But once they get past that, it really, I think, helps them get in touch with, okay, there are some changes that I need to make. And one of the great parts about changing the way you fuel your body is the better feeling that you have about yourself, your whole personal self-worth. I love watching people evolve in here because, as I said, they come in very broken, very down. And, you know, after 3 or 4 visits, we're all laughing and talking and having a great time, and they feel so much better about themselves.
That's great. I saw one of your team members giving responsibility to a child that came in with a mother the other day, and I thought that was real interesting.
Yes.
And so everybody has a responsibility, it sounds like.
Well, you know, we all have responsibility to take care of our health. And we've sort of fallen into this trap, at least in my opinion, that everybody is, someone else is responsible for your health. And that's not really the case. And even children have to be responsible for what they put in their mouth affects how they feel, how they perform. And so we're very big on that.
That's great. I know that physicians are one of your primary referral sources, and you also take insurance. Quite frankly, Jan, I'm kind of surprised that your services are covered under insurance. How does that work?
Well, as healthcare has evolved, we're beginning to understand that prevention is the key. And so we've seen, even in the past 7 years that I've been in practice, more and more things are covered because in the very beginning, if you didn't have uncontrolled diabetes, I couldn't get anything covered. But now we're getting things covered like, okay, your blood sugar's running a little high, your doctor's saying you might have prediabetes. That's pretty easy for us to get covered under insurance because how it makes such great sense that if we can catch it on the front end and prevent you from getting diabetes, how much more cost effective is that for you and for our country than if we let you get full-blown diabetes and then try to fix it. So we're excited about the fact that prevention is being covered more often, and many dietitians don't take insurance because it is a giant hurdle that we have to cross. And so many times the first answer is no, and then we fight really hard with them to get a yes, because if you don't do that, you've knocked out about 80% of the people who really need to see you, and they just can't afford it. So private pay is a part of our business, but we really treasure the insurance part just because I think it makes a difference in people's lives.
I think that's great. Apparently, you also work within the corporate environment. So what do you do for corporate employees?
For corporate employees, we really see their high-risk people. So if it's a local company that we're working with, we'll see people that either have an elevated glucose or prediabetes, diabetes, hypertension, high cholesterol, GI disorders, anything that would be sending them to the doctor on a regular basis. We will see them and help get those numbers controlled. And then all of a sudden, they don't need as much medication. They don't need as many doctor visits. So it's very cost effective for the corporation to send us their people that are at high risk. So that's one thing we do. Another thing we do is we spend a lot of time doing in what we call learn at lunches, where we'll go into a corporation and let their employees just come in, and we'll speak on everything from strategies to manage your stress, or how to pack a healthy brown bag lunch, how to eat out and eat healthy. Goodness, we do a lot of things. I talk a lot about eating for energy, because if you go into a corporation, what's the first thing you see? People are tired. By the end of the day, they're like, I feel horrible at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. How can you help me with that? And so we do talk a lot about energy.
And I bet you it's not coffee that they should be drinking.
It's not. The answer is not more caffeine. You're correct.
I had a feeling that that's what you were going to say. And I would imagine that they are able to operate at peak performance rather than the way they were operating, thus making the company a lot more money. Is that correct?
Exactly. That's why they love us.
Well, thank you for that. Finally, let's get back to our topic of the month, the power of first impressions. Jan, please give a bit of advice in a nutshell that our listeners can follow in order to improve their initial impact on those they meet.
There are 5 principles that I really espouse. There are things that people can do, small little changes that you can make that bring huge results. And so if I have to give people nutrition advice in a nutshell, this is what I always fall back on, because it makes such a huge difference. So the very first thing I would tell people is make sure you're eating something every 3 hours. Your body digests through the foods you eat in about 90 minutes. So if you're going longer than 3 hours, you're again asking your machine to operate on no fuel. So get food in at least every 3 hours. The second piece of advice I would say is make sure there's always a protein in there. You know, so many times people will grab a piece of fruit or a cracker or something to just kind of tide them over. Your body digests through that in like 5 minutes. I mean, it's gone so fast. So put some peanut butter on it. Have it be with a low-fat cheese stick. Have it with some cottage cheese or some Greek yogurt. Make sure there's some protein within your snack, because protein takes the spike of the carbohydrate and just slows down your digestion, allowing you to stay feeling full and satisfied longer.
So it's do that.
Yeah, it's your energy. So the protein is the key. And then the third thing is, we're all guilty of this. Don't let your hunger get ahead of you. Because if you let your hunger overtake you, what happens?
You stuff your mouth.
You overeat, you make bad choices, you get grumpy. My husband always says, honey, it must be time for food. Because your blood sugar drops low and you're just not at your best. So make sure you stay on top of your hunger, and you do that by eating every 3 hours and always having a protein when you do. The fourth thing I think is so important is exercise. And we haven't really talked about that, but I spend a lot of time in this office talking about exercise, because it seems like it wouldn't energize you, but it does. It just makes you feel so much better, and you get those endorphins flowing. It makes you feel better about yourself. You talk about making a better first impression. If you walk in and you've gotten your 30 to 60 minutes of exercise in and you're fueled, wow. You're just a completely different person than if you're out of fuel and you haven't moved your muscles in a while, and that whole fatigued look. Nobody wants that. That's not a good first impression. And then I have one, number 5 on my list. It's sort of my cheerleading statement. And I always make my sourpuss old men that come in and see me, they come in and they're dead set on me not affecting them. I can see it in their eyes, And so I'm like, I have a cheerleading statement for you. And they're like, oh gosh. But anyway, my statement is this: you are only 1 meal away from success. And what that means is the only meal you need to get right is your next one. So just focus on, get up in the morning and go, you know what? I'm going to get my breakfast right. I'm going to get my snack in. I'm going to get lunch right. I'm going to get my snack, dinner right, bedtime snack right. You know how fast time flies by. It is like, right? So 30 days passes by. Now they've lost 5, 6, 7, 8 pounds. Their energy's up. And that is what propels them to keep going, because they feel so much better. So you're only 1 meal away from success.
I love that. I love all of your tips. And hopefully people will be writing them down so that they can follow them. I know I don't eat that often, and so I'm going to take that tip and use it. I thank you so much, Jan. You've been wonderful. Love what you've had to say. And I'm going to make one last suggestion to our listeners. Jan writes a newsletter. It's one of the very few, I admit, that I read on a faithful basis. Actually, I have a file where I keep your newsletters. I also have a 3-ring binder where I copy some of your recipes because I love her recipes. And I'll tell you, almost every time I entertain, I'm using one of your recipes.
Oh boy,
So
that's awesome.
I would suggest to people that they sign up for your newsletter.
Thank you.
And you won't be sorry. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Linda.
You have been listening to The Power of Connections with Connections expert Linda Elliot. Be sure to visit ElliotConnections.com to stay abreast for all the news and interviews each month. The Power of Connections is an Elliot Connections production. You are